The sun hung like a brass medallion in the New Mexico sky, beating down mercilessly on the endless desert. The air shimmered, and every breath tasted of dust. Calder Wyatt pulled his hat lower against the glare, his gray eyes narrowing as he scanned the land ahead. At only 30, his face already carried the worn lines of hardship. The leather reins creaked in his hands as Abraham, his steady bay horse, picked through mesquite and sage. For 2 days, Calder had been tracking 3 stray cattle. 3 animals were the difference between keeping his herd alive through winter or losing everything. He had wandered far from the usual trails, deeper into country where even the Apache seldom lingered. Abraham snorted uneasily, his ears flicking back. Calder trusted the horse more than most men. If the animal felt something was wrong, there was reason. Calder's hand drifted near the revolver on his hip. That was when he saw it. At first it looked like a shadow against the pale trunk of a dead cottonwood, but as he rode closer, the shadow twisted into something sickeningly human. His stomach dropped. A figure hung suspended from the branches, arms stretched wide, bound by thick hemp rope. He spurred Abraham forward, heart pounding. Not a scarecrow, not some cruel trick. It was a young woman. Her skin was copper-toned, her raven-black hair matted and tangled. Her dress of tanned hide was torn and filthy. Her wrists were raw, bleeding where the rope cut deep. But it was the wooden sign hanging around her neck that froze Calder's blood. "White man, don't forgive." The words were carved deep, stained with dried blood. It wasn't justice, it was a message, a warning meant for any passerby bold enough to interfere. Calder had seen thieves strung up before, even killers. But this was different. Deliberate cruelty. The girl's head sagged forward, her hair hiding her face. Then, just barely, her body stirred. A shallow gasp, a tremor. She was alive. Calder swung down from the saddle, his boots sinking into the dust. He stood beneath her, staring up at the broken figure miss. His voice came rougher than he meant. "Can you hear me?" For a long moment, there was nothing but her ragged breathing. He knew the smart choice. Right away, pretend he'd seen nothing. Whoever had done this might be watching. Saving her could bring death to his doorstep. But then, she raised her head a fraction, and her eyes met his. They weren't dulled by weakness. They burned with defiance and something else. "Hope, please," she whispered, the word barely a breath. That was enough. Calder pulled the knife from his belt and reached for the rope. "This'll hurt some," he muttered, bracing himself. "But I'll be gentle." The first rope snapped, her arm dropping like dead weight. She cried out, the sound raw and animal. Calder worked faster, sawing at the knots. With the last strand, she fell limp into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, all bone and fevered skin. He lowered her carefully, his chest tightening at the angry welts where the sun had scorched her. Her breath rattled shallow but steady. Calder tore the hateful sign from her neck and flung it aside. Getting her onto Abraham wasn't easy. She groaned when he lifted her, too weak to resist, but he had no other way. Draped across the saddle like a sack of grain, she looked impossibly small. Calder took the reins, walking beside his horse. He spoke as they moved, partly to calm Abraham, partly to let the girl know she wasn't alone. "Name's Calder Wyatt. Got a little ranch 5 miles west. Nothing grand, but it's a roof and 4 walls. You'll be safe there." She gave no reply, only the faint flutter of her pulse under his fingers. The day dragged on, the sun sinking into copper, and then blood red on the horizon. Calder's throat burned with thirst, but he didn't stop. By the time his ranch came into sight, a low adobe house, lean-to barn and sagging corral, his legs trembled with exhaustion. Inside, the small house felt cooler, shadows soft compared to the blazing desert. Calder laid her on his narrow bed. Rope burns marked her wrists. Fever burned her skin hotter than a branding iron. He fetched water from the basin, his hands surprisingly gentle as he cleaned her wounds. She stirred, a weak moan breaking from her cracked lips. Her dark eyes fluttered open, clouded with confusion. She tried to push away, but lacked the strength. "You're safe," Calder said quickly, raising his hands. "My name's Calder. Found you in the Badlands. This here's my home." Her gaze studied him, sharp even through pain. After a long silence, she sagged back, letting him continue his work. He cleaned the sores, wrapped her wrists, then started beans and salt pork on the stove. When he returned with a plate, she had pushed herself upright against the wall. Her eyes flicked from the food to his face, wary. "It isn't much," he said, offering the plate carefully, "but it'll fill your belly." Her hands trembled as she took it. She ate slowly, each bite deliberate, as if learning again. Calder sat in the chair by the window, eating his own portion. After a while, he said, "Figure I'll call you Lena. My sister's name was Helena. She had dark hair, too. You don't have to keep it, but until you tell me yours, Lena will do." She said nothing, only watched him with those fierce eyes. That night, Calder spread his bedroll on the floor near the stove. "You take the bed," he told her. "I've slept on worse." From the corner of his eye, he saw her relax just a little. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. As the desert night settled, Calder lay staring at the ceiling. The carved sign haunted him. "White man, don't forgive." He'd crossed a line today, one he couldn't step back from. Trouble would come, maybe sooner than later. But as he listened to her soft, uneven breathing in the bed above him, Calder knew one thing for certain. He'd made his choice, and whatever storm it brought, he'd face it. Because mercy mattered more than fear, morning light crept across the floorboards, spilling through the single dusty window. Calder stirred awake on his bedroll, every muscle stiff from the hard floor. He turned his head toward the bed. The girl, Lena, as he had called her, was sitting upright, her back against the wall. Her dark eyes fixed on him, alert, cautious. "You're awake early," Calder said quietly, pushing himself up. He reached for the kettle, pouring water into a tin cup. "You should drink." She hesitated, then accepted the cup. Her hands still shook, but she managed to sip. When the water touched her lips, her throat worked hungrily, as if it had been days since she'd tasted anything. Calder set another cup beside her, then pulled on his boots. "You've got spirit," he muttered, watching her steady herself. "Hanging out there in the sun and still breathing. That alone makes you tougher than most men I've known." Her gaze softened, just slightly, but she still said nothing. Calder studied her face in the daylight. Young, maybe 18, 19. Fever had drained the color from her skin, but strength lingered in the lines of her jaw. Whoever she was, life had not been kind. By midday, she had managed a few bites of cornbread, and though weak, she walked carefully across the room. Calder noticed the way she avoided turning her back to him. She didn't trust him yet. He didn't blame her. He was mending a bridle at the table when the sound of hooves echoed across the valley. His hands froze. Lena stiffened too, her eyes darting to the door. Calder rose slowly, crossing to the window. A small column of riders approached from the east, their dust cloud rising against the sky. "Soldiers, stay inside," Calder said firmly. He lifted the Winchester from the wall and stepped onto the porch. The riders drew closer, 6 men in crisp blue uniforms. Their leader dismounted with practiced grace. His jacket bore the name Lieutenant Theodore Roosevelt, though his face still carried the smoothness of youth. "Mr. Wyatt," the officer called. "That's me," Calder answered, his tone even. "I'm Lieutenant Roosevelt, 5th Cavalry. We're searching for a fugitive." He unfolded a paper, showing a crude sketch of a native girl. "Seen anyone like this?" Calder's jaw tightened. The drawing could have been Lena, or any young Apache woman. "Can't say that I have," Calder replied. "Just me and my horse out here." The lieutenant studied him carefully. "She's accused in the death of a settler named Josiah Coltrane. His brother claims he saw an Indian girl fleeing the scene." Quote, "Accusations don't make truth," Calder said flatly. The sergeant at the officer's side spoke up. "We could take a look around. Barn, root cellar, anywhere a body might hide." "I do mind." Calder cut in. his voice sharp now. "This here's my home. No searches without cause." His hand rested near the Winchester. The lieutenant raised a calming hand. "Easy, Sergeant. Mr. Wyatt is within his rights." He turned back to Calder. "Still, harboring a fugitive is a serious crime." "I'll keep that in mind," Calder said. His face betrayed nothing. After a long pause, the lieutenant nodded. "If you see anything, notify the fort." He remounted his horse. "One more thing, Mr. Wyatt. Locals are stirred up about this coal train business. They might not be as polite as us. Be careful." Calder watched them ride off until their dust disappeared. Then he returned inside. Lena was standing by the door, pale but steady. "You heard?" he asked. She nodded. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she crouched by the cold hearth and drew in the ashes with her finger. First a circle, then stick figures. One lay flat. Another stood with a knife. Around them, more figures loomed. She looked up, her eyes burning. "Self-defense," Calder murmured, reading her meaning. She nodded, then added torn marks near the smaller figure. Her hand shook, but she kept drawing. "A struggle! An attack!" Witnesses who saw what they wanted. Calder's chest tightened. "So Coltrane tried to force you. You fought back." His friends didn't care for the truth. Her hand swept across the ashes, erasing the drawing. She sat back, her shoulders trembling. Calder crouched in front of her. "Listen. You don't need to prove anything to me. I believe you. The world may not, but I do." For the first time, her eyes softened. That night, as the wind whispered against the adobe walls, Calder cleaned his rifle and set water by the bed. He knew what was coming. The lieutenant's warning had been no idle talk. Sure enough, just after midnight, horses thundered in the distance. Lena's eyes flashed to his, wide and alert. Calder moved to the window, his stomach sinking as he saw torchlight approaching. Not soldiers this time, neighbors. Angry men stirred up by Prescott, a rancher with too much pride and too little conscience. "Wyatt," a voice roared. "We know you've got her in there. Send her out, or we'll burn you both." Lena clutched the kitchen knife in trembling hands. Calder put a steadying palm on her arm. "Stay close," he whispered. "This fight's coming whether we like it or not." The night held its breath, waiting for the first spark. The torches lit the yard like angry stars, their glow flickering across hard faces and restless horses. Rain clouds gathered overhead, and thunder rolled far off, as if the heavens themselves were uneasy. "Come out, Wyatt!" Joe Prescott shouted from the front of the mob. He was a broad-shouldered man with a reputation for cruelty, his voice carrying above the storm. "Send the girl out, and we'll spare your place. Stand in our way, and we'll burn you alive inside it." Calder stood tall on the porch, Winchester in his hands. "Everything under my roof is mine to protect," he called back, his voice calm, though his heart hammered. "That includes her. Now, ride on before this turns bloody." The mob roared in anger. Men raised rifles, their torches blazing brighter. Behind Calder, Lena gripped the knife tighter, her knuckles white. She had found her voice once before, and now, with danger at their door, she found it again. "You will not take me," she said firmly, her words carrying out into the night. Her voice trembled, but it held strength too, not alive. Quote, Prescott laughed, ugly and harsh. "Hear that? She admits her guilt. Best we end it quick." The first shot rang out, shattering the night. Calder fired back, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Horses screamed, men shouted, torches swung wildly. Bullets splintered the adobe walls. Lena darted from window to window, thrusting the knife into Calder's hand whenever he reloaded, handing him cartridges with steady resolve. Then, from the darkness beyond the mob, another rifle cracked. One of Prescott's men dropped his torch and fell screaming into the dust. Confusion swept the attackers. More shots came from the ridge north of the ranch. Someone else was fighting with Calder. The mob faltered, their torches wavering. Prescott's voice rose, furious. "Hold your ground! He's just one man!" But the truth was plain. Calder was not alone. Frank Tucker, a grizzled neighbor with his own grudges against Prescott, rode down from the ridge with 2 more men at his side. Their rifles barked, scattering the attackers, horses. The storm broke at last, rain pouring down, drenching torches and turning the yard into mud. In the chaos, Calder shouted, "Lena, now!" Quote. She slipped out the back, her dark form vanishing into the storm. While the men in front pressed their attack, she circled behind, cutting loose the mob's horses. Lightning split the sky, and the beasts bolted, screaming into the night. Panic spread. Men stumbled, shouting over one another. Prescott cursed, trying to rally them, but the fight had turned. Calder's defenders pressed hard, bullets cracking in the storm until the attackers broke, scattering into the desert, their torches drowned in the rain. Silence fell, broken only by the pounding of rain and the groans of the wounded. Prescott lay pinned under his fallen horse, his face twisted with pain and hate. Calder strode through the mud, Lena at his side now, her knife still clutched in her fist. "You should have let her die." Prescott spat through gritted teeth. "Now you'll both pay." Calder leveled the Winchester but didn't fire. His voice was steady. "No, Prescott. Hate already paid your debt. I won't add to it." He turned away, leaving the man to be hauled off by his own broken cause. By dawn, the storm had passed, and the desert lay washed clean. The house bore scars, bullet holes and broken glass, but it still stood. Inside, Calder and Lena sat side by side, exhausted but alive. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "For the first time in a long while," she whispered, "I am not afraid." Calder wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. He knew their troubles were not over. There would be more men like Prescott, more storms on the horizon. But as the sun rose over the drenched desert, he also knew this: they would face them together. Lena lifted her face to his, her dark eyes fierce yet tender. "You gave me back my life," she said. "Now I give you my heart." Calder kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper, the weight of their struggle melting into the warmth between them. Outside, the desert bloomed with the promise of new life after the storm. For 2 broken souls who had found each other in the harshest of places, there was no going back. Only forward, together.